there of checking and validating those judgments, and where necessary, moderating them so that it takes into account the past performance of a school, the differences perhaps between prelims and exams, and also the past achievements of young people. So the process is being and will continue to be designed as carefully as possible to ensure that we don't embed disadvantage there, because the whole thrust of our education approach and policy is to raise excellence in our schools, but also increase equity and close the attainment gap. This is a very challenging set of circumstances to be doing that in, but we don't lose sight of those principles as we try to navigate our way through this particular difficulty. Can I go now to Kenny McBride from Broadcasting Scotland?
Hello? Yes, thank you, First Minister. Given the Sunday Times article this week, which was so scathing about Boris Johnson's complacency in the face of the pandemic, do you now think that the Four Nations approach was a mistake for Scotland? And was your decision to pursue that approach affected in any way by the media in Scotland, who, for example, this week have seen fit to declare the case for independence dead, even as we've learned that the decisions made by the UK government to ignore WHO advice may have cost hundreds, if not thousands, of lives?
No, I don't think it was a mistake, and no, it wasn't driven by the media in any way. I mean, I'll refer back to an answer I gave a moment ago, and this may or may not disappoint anybody who wants to try to make what the very traumatic situation we're living through right now, and I mean traumatic in a health sense, an economic sense, an emotional sense for people, to try to reduce that to politics. I don't really have space in my head or my day right now to do anything other than try to navigate the best way forward for the country to get us in as good a way through this crisis as I possibly can, and that's what I'll continue to focus on. Trying to do things in a Four Nations way, given the geography of the Four Nations and three of those nations in particular, seems to me to make sense. This is a virus. It doesn't respect borders or boundaries, and we see people moving freely across the Four Nations. So it makes sense that if we are to be as effective as possible in combating this virus, we've got to align our activity as much as possible. And of course, some of the decisions about how we manage the impact of this, the quantity of economic and business support, given that borrowing power still lie with the UK government, demands and rests on decisions that are taken there. But that said, I will never be a prisoner of that if something different is required for Scotland. And we have taken different decisions on some issues where we thought that was necessary. We decided to move away from mass gatherings a bit earlier. We announced the closure of schools a little bit earlier. The lockdown, when it came earlier in the spread of the infection in Scotland. And of course, we are taking a slightly tougher approach when it comes to business closure. Construction, for example, being an example of that, where we are saying to non-essential construction sites that they should be closed where there is different advice elsewhere. So we will take the decision. I will take the decisions I think are right for Scotland. So I go back. This is where I go back to my earlier answer. I'm not going to not do what is right for Scotland because I want to stay in a Four Nations approach, although I think the importance of aligning is obvious for the reasons I've given. But nor am I going to come at this from the perspective of saying I must do something different for Scotland for the sake of it, if that is not the right thing to do. So I am going to continue just now trying to do the right things and reach the right judgments about how we save lives in Scotland, protect our NHS and suppress this virus. And over the coming weeks, make the judgments about how we do all of that with restoring as much normality to life as possible. And I will be driven by what I judge, with all the advice and the evidence that I have access to, by what I judge to be in the best interest of the people I serve, which is the people of Scotland. But it will not be a traditional political calculation. It will be a calculation and a judgment driven by protecting the people of Scotland from this massive public health emergency.